So you mean to tell me in the 1950s white people still didn't season their food? Lovecraft Country, Episode 2, picks up the next day with Uncle George and Letty grooving to the sounds of Janae Dubois' Moving On Up. We're treated to a montage of them enjoying the spoils of the mansion. Uncle George enjoys a library stocked with all his favorite books, and Letty has a wardrobe full of gorgeous clothes that fit her like a glove. And where is Atticus during all of this? Is he also getting too comfortable in these white people's house? The song fades out as we see him, the only one who seems to remember the experience from last night. Letty, Atticus, and George barely escape Sheriff Hunt and the unknown monsters that are definitely not Shoggoths. The three are brought out of their rooms by the sounds of bells and are greeted by William, who explains to them that those are lunch bells. As William escorts them to lunch, Atticus questions him about the location of his father. According to William, Montrose has traveled to Boston with Christina Braithwaite, who we can assume is the one who saved them back in Simmonsville. We get a brief history of the Braithwaites, the owners of the lodge our heroes are staying in. The entire village Ardham was founded generations ago by Titus Braithwaite, who built his fortune through shipping, aka slavery, as Letty instantly points out. We learn that Titus died in the Great Fire during the autumnal equinox of 1833. An autumnal equinox is one of two moments in the year when the sun is exactly above the equator, and day and night are the same amount of time. William hints that there was a sole survivor of the fire. We learn that Samuel Braithwaite has called a meeting of lodge members for a celebratory dinner tonight. We don't know what it is they're celebrating exactly. Atticus wants to search the village for his father, which William allows as long as they return in time for dinner. When they're finally alone, Atticus tries to understand why Uncle George and Letty are seemingly unfazed by their near-death experiences. Neither of them can remember the events of last night. The monsters, the cabin in the woods, none of it. They agree to stick together and search for Montrose before they get the hell out of there. As they head into the village, Atticus is shocked to see Woody still intact after Letty crashed it into the cabin. None of this makes sense. Letty questions Uncle George about Atticus's mental health. Could he be shell-shocked from his experiences in the Korean War? Atticus overhears them and quickly denies that he is going crazy. He insists that a wardrobe full of clothes that fits Letty perfectly and a library full of Uncle George's favorite books doesn't make any sense either. Suddenly, Atticus hears the same whistle that saved them from the monsters last night. He follows the sound to the only stone structure in the village. They run into a white woman, Dell, who is holding the whistle and two dogs. She drops a few microaggressions on them before urging them to head back to the lodge in time for dinner. They all agree, due to the stone foundation, that Montrose must be in the basement of this silo. On the walk back, Uncle George is suddenly reminded about Atticus's mom and her great ancestor Hannah. She was a slave that escaped her master's house after a fire. Could this be the same fire that killed Titus Braithwaite? Before Tick has time to process any of this, they are suddenly surrounded by the same monsters that attacked them last night. Just then, Christina Braithwaite shows up, whistle in hand, to call them off. Christina orders Dell to escort Atticus to Samuel Braithwaite's lab and confine Letty and Uncle George to their rooms. Once again, they are left with no memory of the monsters they just saw. Only Atticus seems to be immune to whatever MIB memory eraser the Braithwaites are using. Atticus is brought to the lab, where we meet Christina's father, Samuel Braithwaite. President Grant really took the breakup with Olivia hard, huh? Meanwhile, Uncle George is trying to make sense of everything when he stumbles upon a hidden book, The Order of the Ancient Dawn. Back in Samuel Braithwaite's lab, he is having a piece of his insides removed while he is wide awake. Samuel casually puts back on his clothes and goes off on a monologue about Adam and the dawn of time, when everything, man, woman, even the lowliest creatures, were exactly where they belonged. Samuel Braithwaite longs for the time of Adam and to return to the paradise God created before Eve ate the apple. Christina thinks Atticus has a part to play in Samuel's quest to return to Eden. Once he's done monologuing, Samuel sends Atticus back to his room, but not before Atticus notices two names inscribed on an ancient painting. Titus Braithwaite, who we know is the patriarch of the Braithwaites and potentially Atticus's great-great-grandfather. The other name, Horatio Winthrop. Who is Horatio Winthrop? As Christina escorts Tick back to his room, they argue about their intentions. Atticus knows that she used some kind of spell to make Uncle George and Letty forget the monsters. He accuses them of being wizards from the KKK, Christina assures him that her father would never associate with an organization as poor as the Ku Klux Klan. Violent racist terrorists are fine, but poverty is where Samuel Braithwaite draws the line. Christina can't take Atticus to his father, but he manages to convince her to lift the memory spell on Letty and Uncle George. All three of them are trapped in their respective rooms, but at least they have their memory back. Christina leaves in haste to go deliver what looks like a baby monster being birthed through a cow. They have cheesy music over this scene like it's not a disgusting creature being born. Apparently, this is the first time she has delivered a monster. She seems really happy about this. Back in the house, Letty, Uncle George, and Atticus are confined to their rooms and are visited by magic-induced hallucinations of people they care about. Letty sees a fake version of Atticus who tries to seduce her before his private parts turn into a poisonous snake. Atticus is confronted by a Korean woman dressed in army gear who tries to kill him. Meanwhile, Uncle George sees Atticus's mom, Dora. He knows immediately that she isn't real. She's dead. They dance together and we learn that she, Montrose, and George all lived in Tulsa, up until the massacre of 1921. You may recall this event was depicted in the HBO series Watchmen. Eventually, the bell rings for the dinner celebration, and they are released from their rooms. William informs them that it's a black tie event and women are not allowed to attend. They are all shaken from their hallucinations, but Uncle George tries to be their strength. He reminds Letty that she is Letitia fucking Lewis. Atticus and George are brought to dinner, where Samuel Braithwaite is serving a piece of himself to everyone. Literally. Uncle George interrupts dinner like a boss and lets them know he knows all about the Order of the Ancient Dawn and their bylaws, the book he discovered earlier. He lets them know that any men who are direct descendants of Titus are automatically members, sons among sons, and they have authority over regular old members. Since Atticus is the last blood heir of Titus, he orders everyone except Samuel to get the fuck out. These white men do not like that. Atticus orders Samuel to release his father, but Fitz isn't as malleable as the rest of the order. He admits that he needs the diluted blood of Atticus, but he's still not taking any orders from him. Tick and George race to the stone mill to rescue Montrose from the basement. They find his flask, so they know he's been held there. Dell shows up and is about to shoot them before Letty saves the day again. She has the silver Bentley and is ready to escape, but first they need to follow the escape tunnel Montrose dug. We finally meet Montrose Freeman in person, played by Michael K. Williams. Even though this is a rescue, he's upset that Tick and George showed up. Atticus is visibly dejected by his dad's lack of gratitude. Letitia reminds them that they need to get the fuck out of there. They head out while Uncle George tries to drop all the knowledge he acquired from the bylaws when they suddenly crash into an invisible force field. It's Samuel and Christina. And Samuel shoots Letty before they can catch a breath. You can't be fucking serious. Letty is fatally shot and dies in Atticus's arms. Samuel gives Atticus a choice of who else will die, and we see him fire another shot before the screen goes black. We fade up to see a butt-naked Atticus being prepared for the ceremony. Atticus reminds Christina that it didn't go well when it was attempted by Titus. They bond over their mutual disdain for their fathers, when we see through a spy portal that Letty has been brought back to life, but Uncle George is wounded from the other gunshot. Christina assures him that her father is a man of his word, and he will heal Uncle George if Tick cooperates with the ceremony. Christina gives Atticus a ring that belongs to the Order, and he's ready to open the portal. We see a revived Letitia freak out over dying and coming back to life. George and Montrose are reminiscing as he's bleeding to death on the bed. This is where we get the revelation that Atticus may not be Montrose's son after all. He may be George's. The mere mention of this enrages Montrose. They agreed never to speak of this, and Montrose isn't happy about it being brought up now. We cut to the ceremony beginning, set to Gil Scott-Heron's Whitey on the Moon, also the title of this episode. Gil Scott-Heron was a spoken word artist who passed away in 2011. Kanye West fans may remember his Who Will Survive in America, sampled on Dark Twisted Fantasy. The sci-fi kicks into full gear as Atticus is used as a tool for Samuel to open the portal to the Garden of Eden. It's working and the portal is opening, but Atticus is in considerable pain. Through the portal, he sees a glimpse of someone on the other end. Is this the great-great-grandmother Hannah? She is pregnant and dressed like a slave. Suddenly, the house starts to fall apart. George, Montrose, and Letty attempt to escape. They are no longer trapped in their room, and Letty runs to get Woody. We cut back to Atticus, who appears to be able to control the power of the portal through the ring Christina gave him. With one big scream, he closes the portal, and the energy from it turns all the members in attendance into stone, including Samuel Braithwaite. The foundations of the lodge start to crumble, and Hannah, or the ghost of Hannah, leads Atticus out of the collapsing house. A pillar falls onto the stone Samuel, and now he's dead. We see fire surrounding Hannah as she escapes. Is this a vision of the past and when Titus died trying to open the portal generations ago? Tick is safe, and he meets Letty outside. They embrace, but there's no time for celebration. Uncle George is dead from his gunshot wounds. He's lying in the arms of his brother Montrose. We saw that Samuel died in the rubble, so there is no one alive to revive Uncle George in the way he did Letty. The episode ends with all three of them mourning the death of Uncle George. So what just happened? This group that Atticus defeated is known as the Sons of Adam. They are one of many lodges across the country who follow the Order of the Ancient Dawn. Hannah, Atticus's great-great-grandmother, who was either a secret lover or raped by Titus Braithwaite, helped Atticus use the power of his blood to destroy Samuel Braithwaite and led him out of the collapsing house through the same path she escaped the original burning lodge. Titus Braithwaite tried to create a portal to the Garden of Eden and failed. His distant cousin, Samuel Braithwaite, set up an elaborate trap, kidnapping Montrose and having him send a letter under duress to lure Atticus to his lodge and use his lineage to open the portal. Montrose Freeman and Uncle George both were in love with the same woman back in Tulsa, Atticus's mom, Dora. At some point, Uncle George agreed never to speak again of Tick's questionable parentage. He went back on his promise after he was shot by Samuel. Letty was shot and killed, but was revived by Samuel and his magic. But unfortunately, Uncle George wasn't. And with Samuel dead after the ceremony, he's gone for good. Oh, and Christina was giving birth to these creatures by inseminating cows. So random. That's it for episode 2. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's breakdown. And if there's any questions you have from this episode that we didn't answer, leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.